They say the Cold War ended in 1991, that the Berlin Wall fell, the Soviet Union collapsed, and the world entered a new age of peace, democracy, and capitalism. But what if that story isn't entirely true? What if the Cold War, the rivalry between East and West, democracy and dictatorship, freedom and control, never really ended? What if it simply evolved? That's the story we're telling today. This is how the Cold War never truly ended. It just changed shape. The end that wasn't an end. When the Soviet Union fell in 1991, it seemed like the end of history. The United States stood alone as the world's superpower. Capitalism had triumphed. Democracy had won. At least that's what everyone thought. But the reality was far more complicated. The Soviet Union disappeared, yes, but the people, the networks, and the institutions that built it didn't vanish overnight. The intelligence officers, the generals, the oligarchs, they simply adapted. And while the West celebrated victory, Russia sank into chaos. The 1990s were a decade of humiliation, economic collapse, and corruption. Ordinary Russians lost their savings, their jobs, and their faith in the West's promises. Out of that chaos came something new, or rather something very old, a desire for revenge, a desire to restore pride, power, and control. And one man in particular would dedicate his career to doing just that. Putin and the return of the old guard. When Vladimir Putin rose to power in 1999, he inherited a broken country. But he also inherited the mindset of the KGB, a worldview forged in secrecy, suspicion, and strategy. For Putin, the collapse of the Soviet Union wasn't liberation. It was, as he once said, the greatest geopolitical catastrophe of the 20th century. From that point on, his mission became clear: rebuild Russian influence, reassert control, and push back against the West. But this time, not with tanks in Berlin or missiles in Cuba, but with money, media, and manipulation. Putin's Russia didn't need to spread communism. It didn't need to win hearts and minds. It just needed to weaken its rivals, to sow division, distrust, and disunity in the West. And in that goal, it's been remarkably effective. The West's dangerous naivety. After the fall of the USSR, the West believed the world had changed forever. That open markets and globalization would create peace. That if Russia traded with the world, it would become like the world. But that was never Putin's plan. While Western nations cut defense budgets and dismantled old intelligence networks, Russia was rebuilding its own. While Europe grew dependent on Russian gas, Moscow used that energy as leverage. And while NATO debated its purpose, Russia prepared to test it. The result? Georgia in 2008, Crimea in 2014, Ukraine in 2022. Each conflict wasn't an isolated event. It was a continuation of the Cold War by other means. The West thought it was living in a post-war world. Russia never did. The new frontier, cyber warfare. During the original Cold War, spies traded microfilms in dark alleys. Today, they trade malware through cables and satellites. Cyber warfare has become the new front line of global conflict. From election interference to hacking power grids, states now fight battles without firing a single shot. The 2016 US election revealed just how powerful this new warfare can be. Russian troll farms spread fake news, hacked political emails, and used social media to inflame existing divisions. It was psychological warfare, 21st century propaganda. But it's not just Russia anymore. China, Iran, North Korea, all are part of a new digital arms race. Instead of nuclear warheads, they deploy information, disinformation, and surveillance technology. It's not a Cold War fought with missiles, it's one fought with memes, code, and data. China and the second front. If Russia represents the ghost of the old Cold War, China represents the new one. Unlike the Soviet Union, China doesn't want to destroy capitalism. It wants to dominate it. Through trade, technology, and global infrastructure projects like the Belt and Road Initiative, China has expanded its influence across the planet. And behind the economic power lies political control, surveillance, and military ambition. The rivalry between the US and China today mirrors the Cold War's great ideological struggle: democracy versus authoritarianism, freedom versus control. Only this time, it's not about ideology on paper. It's about data, AI, supply chains, and control of the world's digital future. Huawei, TikTok, microchips, rare earth minerals. These are the new battlegrounds. It's not about nuclear missiles in Cuba anymore. It's about who builds the next generation of technology and who controls the information flowing through it. A multipolar world unlike the old Cold War, today's world isn't divided into two clear sides. It's fragmented, complex, multipolar. We live in a world where countries can be allies in trade, but rivals in security. Where Western democracies depend on Chinese manufacturing. Where Russian oil still fuels European economies, even during sanctions. It's not a simple us versus them anymore. It's a tangled web of power and dependence. And that makes the modern Cold War even more dangerous. Because this time everyone is connected. And when everyone is connected, conflict doesn't need to explode. It can quietly infiltrate. Information, the new weapon. If the nuclear bomb defined the 20th century, information defines the 21st. Controlling information means controlling reality itself. And today that's where much of the Cold War continues to play out. Disinformation campaigns, deepfakes, algorithmic manipulation, all tools used to destabilize societies from within. You don't need to invade a country if you can make its people stop trusting their own institutions. That's the essence of modern warfare. Not to destroy, but to divide. From Russia's propaganda networks to China's internet censorship, control of information is now the ultimate battlefield. And unlike the old Cold War, this one isn't confined to superpowers. It plays out in every country, on every screen, every day. The return of fear for a few brief decades. We thought the world had escaped the constant fear that defined the 20th century. The fear of nuclear annihilation, of espionage, of global conflict. But that fear is back. Nuclear rhetoric has returned to global politics. The arms race is accelerating. NATO is expanding again. And the world feels more divided than it has in decades. We've come full circle, back to a world defined by suspicion, alliances, and the constant shadow of escalation. The Cold War within, but perhaps the most dangerous part of this new Cold War isn't between nations, it's within them. Societies around the world are tearing themselves apart from the inside. Political polarization, conspiracy theories, distrust of media and government, all symptoms of a deeper global struggle over truth. And that's exactly what foreign powers exploit. The Cold War never really ended because the struggle it represented between truth and propaganda, openness and control, still defines our world. It's not East versus West anymore. It's truth versus manipulation, reality versus narrative, freedom versus fear. So no, the Cold War didn't end in 1991. It just went underground. It became invisible, digital, psychological, economic. It's no longer fought with missiles and tanks, but with code, data, and influence. And maybe that's the most dangerous kind of war of all. Because this one doesn't end when a wall falls or when a treaty is signed. It ends only when we stop fighting for truth and start believing in illusions. Until then, the Cold War lives on, not in history books, but in our headlines, our timelines, and our minds. If you found this video thought-provoking, consider subscribing for more deep dives into history, politics, and the hidden forces shaping our world. Because sometimes to understand the present, we have to remember the wars that never really ended.